He was rich, famous, powerful, but one secret addiction destroyed his entire life. This isn't a Hollywood script. This is real. It's the story of a man who had everything the world could offer, but was empty inside. He chased success, applause, and pleasure. But in the end, he was left with nothing but silence and shame. Until one night, he cried out to the one he thought had forgotten him, and heaven answered. If you've ever felt like your life is too far gone, listen closely, because this story just might be your story too. In the heart of Philadelphia, where the light bounced off gray brick buildings and tired souls shuffled between broken dreams and fleeting hope, lived a man named Eli Matthews. Eli wasn't a bad man, not entirely. He'd once been a pastor, a voice of comfort in a fractured community, a shepherd of the lost. People used to come to him not just for prayer, but for meaning, and he gave them that in gentle sermons under leaking church ceilings and in his rough hands holding theirs during hospital vigils. But that was before the bottle, before the scandal, before the night everything fell apart. Eli remembered that night with haunting clarity. It was a Wednesday. Rain battered the church windows like fists trying to tear inside. The pews were empty, had been for weeks now, but Eli sat alone in the front, a half-empty bottle of bourbon in his coat pocket and a deeper emptiness in his soul. They said pastors weren't supposed to bleed like this. They weren't supposed to doubt, to spiral, to break. But Eli had done it all. He'd fallen for a woman who wasn't his wife, a desperate mistake that spiraled into whispers, then gossip, then church elders politely asking him to step down for the sake of the congregation. The woman? Gone. His wife? Gone. His faith? He wasn't sure. The following year unfolded in fragments: a motel room, 2 jobs lost, a string of sleeping bags under overpasses. Eli became a ghost in his own city, avoiding the streets near the old church, ducking past old friends, praying no one would recognize him, and yet something kept him breathing. One morning, shivering in the corner of a bus station at 3 a.m., he heard a woman softly humming. It was a tune he hadn't heard in years. Come thou fount of every blessing. She was sitting beside a vending machine, holding a worn-out Bible with both hands like it was the only thing holding her together. Her name was Teresa, a former addict, a former mother, a still-believing daughter of God. They talked for hours. She didn't ask about his past, just looked him in the eyes and said, "You still got light in you, preacher." It was the first time in a long time he cried. The days that followed were quiet steps toward something that resembled life again. He started volunteering at a local soup kitchen, pretending to be just Eli, not Pastor Eli, not broken Eli, just a man learning how to stand up again. One afternoon, as he cleaned up spilled rice and mopped the floor, a child came in with his mother. The little boy tugged at Eli's coat and whispered, "Are you Jesus?" Eli laughed, a bitter, cracked sound. "No, kid. Far from it," the child frowned. "But you look like you could be one of his friends." Eli blinked. It struck something deep. That night, Eli stood under the cold, wide sky and looked up for the first time in months. "God," he whispered, voice hoarse. "If you're still there, I don't deserve you, but I need you." No lightning struck. No angel appeared, but something inside him moved. He started attending a small Bible study group run by a retired janitor named Marvin, who didn't care who Eli had been, only who he wanted to become. Week by week, Eli listened. He didn't speak much, but the words seeped into him. Words like mercy, grace, redemption, not just as concepts, but as lifelines. Then came the letter. A yellow envelope with no return address slipped under the door of the soup kitchen. Inside was a note written in delicate script. "He's not finished with you yet. Come home." There was no signature, but Eli knew. He packed his few belongings in a duffel bag and boarded a night bus heading south. Not to any home he could name, but to a place where he might find out what it meant to start again. The bus rolled through towns with names he didn't recognize, places with forgotten diners, rusting windmills, and people who waved at strangers, like they'd known them forever. Eventually, the driver called out, "End of the line, Desert Grove." It was a small town nestled at the edge of nowhere. One gas station, one grocery store, and one tiny chapel with peeling white paint and a bell that hadn't rung in years. Eli stood in front of it, hands shaking. "God," he said again. "Why? Here?" A voice behind him answered, "Because this is where you begin again." It was Marvin, or someone who looked just like him. But when Eli turned around, there was no one there. Inside the chapel, everything was still. Dust floated in the sunlight like angels pausing mid-flight. He sat on the front pew and laid his hands on his knees. He didn't know what to say. What prayer could fit the ruins of a life? Then a whisper stirred in the wind outside. "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." Eli wept, not because he was sad, but because, for the first time in a long time, he believed it might be true. Over the weeks, he cleaned the chapel. He painted the walls, repaired broken benches. A widow named June brought him lunch and told him stories about how the town used to gather there every Sunday back when her husband was alive. "You remind me of him," she said, handing him a jar of homemade jam. Same kind of sadness, same kind of light. Eli smiled. "I'm not ready to preach again." June shrugged. "You don't need to. Just show up. The words will come when he's ready." One Sunday morning, he opened the doors. He didn't advertise, didn't announce. But people came, 5 at first, then 7, then 12. They sat on the old pews, hands folded, eyes searching. Eli stepped to the pulpit. The wood creaked under his weight. He took a breath. "My name is Eli Matthews," he began. "I used to be a pastor. Then I broke. And for a long time, I thought that meant I was done." He looked up. "But God doesn't throw people away." A hush fell over the room. "I'm not here to preach at you. I'm just here to remind you that grace isn't earned. It's given. And I'm living proof of that." Someone sniffled. Another whispered, "Amen." Later that evening, alone, in the chapel, Eli lit a single candle. He stared at the flame and whispered, "Thank you. For the brokenness, for the silence, for the second chance." Outside, the desert wind carried the sound of something holy. Maybe it was just the night. Maybe it was angels. But Eli knew one thing. For certain, he had come home. The sun rose slowly over Desert Grove. It wasn't like the city, where morning was drowned in honking horns and blinking neon. Here, light crept gently across the horizon, like a shy guest asking to come in. Eli Matthews stood in the chapel doorway, coffee in hand, watching as the dawn painted gold across the hills. It had been 3 months since he opened the church doors. The pews, once covered in dust and cobwebs, now held people with stories. Widows, farmers, teenagers lost in questions. None of them perfect. All of them searching. Just like him. One Sunday, after service, a young woman stayed behind. She looked about 20, hair dyed copper red, arms tattooed with scripture verses and scars that told their own gospel. "Can I ask you something?" she said, chewing the edge of her hoodie sleeve. "Always." Eli nodded. She hesitated. "I was in prison for 2 years. I did some ugly things. When I was locked up, I kept hearing this voice. Sounded like my grandma telling me, 'He still loves you.' I thought maybe I was going crazy." Eli smiled. Maybe it wasn't crazy. Maybe it was grace. Her eyes welled up. "Am I allowed here?" Eli reached out, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. "This place is for the wounded. That means it's yours." Her name was Raina. She came every week after that, sitting in the second row, whispering prayers like she was scared they'd shatter if spoken too loud. As the congregation grew, so did the whispers. The old deacon from the next town visited one day. Sharp gray, suit-clipped voice. He listened to Eli's sermon, then pulled him aside. "You're doing good work here," he said. "Thanks," Eli replied. "But your past," the man said, clearing his throat. "It's come up. Some think someone else should lead. Someone untainted. Eli paused. His chest tightened, like old wounds trying to split open. I understand, he said. The man blinked, caught off guard. You do? I do. Eli nodded. But I'm not leading because I'm flawless. I'm leading because I'm forgiven. The deacon didn't stay for coffee. Later that evening, Eli sat alone in the sanctuary. Rain tapped the chapel windows, just like it had the night he first fell. But now, the sound was different. Not a storm. Just rain, soft, cleansing. He opened his worn Bible and reread the verse that had become his anchor. Create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a right spirit within me. Psalm 51:10. Wind passed through the open doorway. The candle beside him flickered. He closed his eyes. I'm not perfect, Lord, he whispered, but if you're willing, I'll keep going. Weeks turned to months. The chapel became a place of healing, not just for Eli, but for the entire town. Raina started a youth music group. June ran grief support on Tuesdays. A man named Harold, who used to sleep behind the gas station, led a small prayer circle for recovering addicts. Nobody asked for credentials. Their testimony was their transformation. And then, one ordinary Thursday, she came. Her name was Sarah. Eli saw her standing in the back of the chapel, arms folded, face unreadable. It had been 5 years since he'd last seen her. Since the scandal, the divorce, the silence that followed. She hadn't aged, or maybe she had, but so had he. Sarah, he said, barely above a whisper. She nodded. I heard you were here. Eli's mouth went dry. I didn't expect, I don't know what to say. She walked forward, eyes scanning the space. This place, it's peaceful. It saved me, he said, voice shaking. He saved me. But this was the wilderness I needed to find him again. Silence. Then she whispered, I'm glad you did. A pause. Me too. They didn't talk much that night, just sat together on the chapel steps, the stars above whispering secrets to the world below. I'm not here to dig up the past, Sarah finally said. I forgave you long ago, but I needed to see for myself, to see if what they said about you was true. What did they say? Eli asked. That you'd become a different man. She turned to him. They were right. Sarah didn't stay in Desert Grove. She had a new life, a job, a new church. But before she left, she hugged him tight and said, Don't stop. You're doing holy work. Eli watched her drive off down the dusty road with tears in his eyes, not of sorrow, but of release. Some chains aren't physical, and some goodbyes are gifts in disguise. 1 year later, the chapel bell rang for the first time in decades. It wasn't for a wedding or a funeral. It was just a Sunday. But the town gathered anyway. Eli stood behind the pulpit, looking out at the crowd. Faces filled with hope, pain, laughter, history. He cleared his throat. When I first arrived here, he began, I thought I was running away. But now I know. I was being led. He looked out at Raina holding a toddler she'd recently adopted. At Harold with a Bible in one hand and a sobriety chip in the other. At the empty seat in the second row where June used to sit, she had passed peacefully the week before, whispering hymns as she went. I don't have many answers, Eli continued. But I have this. God doesn't just redeem moments. He redeems lives. And if you're still breathing, He's not finished with yours. That night, Eli stood once more under the stars. Thank you, he whispered. For every fall, for every desert, for every broken thing you made whole. The wind carried his words into the quiet. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled, and the moon spilled light across the hills like a benediction. Eli closed his eyes and smiled. Epilogue. Years later, a young boy walked into the chapel, now restored and vibrant. He found an old journal on the pastor's desk, opened it, and read the first line. I was lost, but grace found me. Eli didn't deserve a second chance. But grace isn't about deserving. It's about surrender, and when he let go of pride and pain, God did what no rehab, no friend, and no money could ever do. He gave Eli a new heart, a new identity, a new life. Maybe you're not Eli, but maybe you're broken. Maybe you've run too far. Let this story remind you, God isn't finished with you. If you felt something today, leave a in the comments. Share this with someone who's lost hope. And remember, God is with, always, even in your darkest night.